Yeah, ladies and gentlemen, we had already fantastic scientific input this morning, very complex, but this session, I would like to say, is not less complex. It's on policies, market-based instruments, regulatory instruments, maybe different from the scientific point, but looking at my career, science and regulatory measures, science and policies, they are always closely related. No good policies with no good scientific background. But firstly, some few words to myself. I'm Wolfgang Zornbach. I used to be head of the climate department of the Ministry of Agriculture until beginning of last year. Then I retired, and that was the time for Paul to ask me to become vice president of 4 per mille. Well, I said, that's fine. I like to do that because I know that the people working here are really, really ambitious, and that is important for the future, not only of us, but also of our children and grandchildren, to look at what's happening there in the soils, to look at what's happening there with our climate. And that's the reason why I said, yes, honorary vice president, it's a good job. And now I've been asked to moderate this policy session because that was part of my task when I was working at the ministry. And it's not only policies, I was also responsible for financing the humus klimanetz you have heard of, and I'm really happy to see so many people from that network also here. And tomorrow I'm looking forward to visit a farm of that humus klimanetz. So we have all together been asked to keep the time. So for that reason, I asked the first presenter to come up. I would be happy if you could keep 10 minutes for your presentation, then maybe that at the end we have a little bit time for questions and answers. If not, okay, then we have to keep it until lunch. And I would be happy if you could help me at the end to sum up a little bit the highlights of our presentations, because in the harvesting session this afternoon, as Paul already mentioned, it will be my task to present the highlights of this session. And 7 presentations and then highlight in 3 sentences, and that's not so easy. So first presenter is now Professor Dr. José Martinez from the University of Göttingen. He is director of the Institute of Agricultural Law, so a lawyer. It's also some kind of science, isn't it? In Germany, and he presents something about governing soil carbon, balancing public good and market value. So, the floor is open to you.
So, ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, thank you very much for the invitation and the opportunity to speak to you today. My presentation is titled Balancing Public Good and Market Value, Governing Soil Carbon. Well, as Mr. Zornbach said, I'm a lawyer. Well, probably I'm one of the few lawyers here in this group. We lawyers do not have the best reputation. We are seen as the ones who set limits and stifle creativity. Today I want to show you that the law offers a wide range of opportunities to promote carbonization, but these have not been yet fully exploited. Few topics encapsulate the challenge of aligning public interest and market dynamics as vividly as the governance of soil carbon. Soils are not just passive media for agricultural production. As you know, they are vital carbon sinks, pivotal for climate change mitigation, biodiversity, and the long-term fertility for our landscapes. They represent a classic public good, underpinning food security, resilient water cycles, and healthy ecosystems worldwide. Yet, agricultural land management operates under economic realities, marked by price competition, market volatility, and globalized value change. With the rise of carbon trading, soil carbon credits, and innovative positive business models, markets are increasingly trying to monetize the climate values of soils, making investments in climate-smart soil management accessible and attractive to private sector actors. Here, the public good and the market mechanism collide directly. While soil carbon preservation is in everyone's interest, supporting climate goals, water retention, and food security, effective policy also relies on market-based incentives, legal certainty, and robust governance structures to mobilize engagement and investment across the board. Oh, it functions. It works. So, this brings us to several central questions. How can we design political, regulatory, and economic frameworks that safeguard the societal value of soil carbon while also harnessing market innovation? What governance architectures establish effective, binding environmental targets, transparency, and accountability, while unlocking public and private investments? And what can we learn from current experience to ensure that public good and market value are not at odds, but mutually reinforcing? Let me structure my remarks along three essential governance dimensions: policy, regulation, and market-based instruments, also illustrating each with some practical examples and highlighting persistent challenges. First, the policy level. Governments and international institutions have set ambitious targets for soil carbon protection and sequestration, making it a key theme in climate and agricultural strategies. The EU Green Deal, Farm to Fork strategy, and the 4 per 1,000 initiative are prominent examples where soil carbon is put explicitly at the center of climate action. Many countries now incorporate soil carbon management into their national determined contributions under the Paris Agreement. Germany's Climate Change Act, for example, mandates the expansion of permanent grasslands and peatland restoration. China's 5-year plan actively promotes broad-based soil carbon monitoring and investments in humus building. To translate these ambitions into action, states provide targets, incentives, such as subsidies for cover cropping, composting, reduced tillage, and agroforestry. The EU Common Agricultural Policy ties eco-schemes and direct payments increasingly to sustainable soil practices, and programs like Spain's support for agroforestry reimburse up to 40% of farm investment costs for integrating trees in arable systems. These strategies are often cross-sectoral, connecting climate, biodiversity, and productivity objectives while making innovative projects such as carbon farming pilots in the Netherlands or national soil monitoring networks in Germany, and also supporting digitalization and science policy advisory structures. International cooperation is crucial. With over 600 partners, well, you know it better than I, 4 per 1,000 networks promote the exchange of best practice and harmonization of methods. All these efforts reflect a growing global consensus that soil carbon, beyond being an economic issue, is a shared thread of sustainable development. Second, we must consider regulation and its role in providing security and enforceability and minimum standards for long-term public benefits. Legal requirements and standards are diverse. Soil protection and erosion laws, crop rotation mandates, rules for permanent soil cover, and detailed fertilizer and pesticide regimes are being established, for instance, in Germany, Austria, or Switzerland. The trend is towards evidence-based and quantifiable management. Many countries oblige farmers to document management practices, carry out regular soil sampling, and report organic carbon data. Compliance is monitored digitally using satellite monitoring, central soil registries, and standardized soil organic carbon protocols. Failure to comply can result in substantial fines or subsidy reductions. In protected areas, rules are more stringent. For instance, Denmark's satellite-based risk monitoring led to hundreds of farms corrections just last year. Switzerland's multi-year surveys across 2,500 sites from the basis of the national SOC's trend. Regulatory controls and the threat of sanctions create transparency and ensure that incentives and payment are effective and justified. Third, let's look at market-based instruments, an area showing particular dynamic developments. More and more farmers and land managers can monetize climate-smart practices through soil carbon credits. These are generated by verifiable actions, humus building, agroforestry, or reduced tillage, and sold on voluntary and regulated carbon markets. Australia's Emission Reductions Fund, we will hear about in a few minutes, has seen over $100 million paid in soil carbon credits. Dutch farmers receive up to €150 per certified ton of sequestered CO2, and companies like Bayer reward sustainable soil practices while procuring carbon credits to corporate buyers. Beyond carbon credits, payments for ecosystem services, the PSE, are becoming established. In Switzerland, up to 113 Swiss franc have been awarded annually for practices benefiting soil, water, and biodiversity. Companies now systematically invest in soil carbon projects for Scope 3 climate targets, while impact investors, banks, and insurance schemes offer preferential rates for verified climate-friendly practices. Despite this progress, the challenges are considerable. Robust measurements and monitoring remain expensive and often out of reach for smaller farms. The permanence of soil carbon storage is inherently uncertain, as management or extreme weather may reverse gains. The risk of greenwashing is real, as is the danger that complex certification and transaction costs exclude smallholders and favor large professionalized actors. Careful market design, transparency, and credible standards are essential to avoid these pitfalls. We must also acknowledge that while these governance approaches are increasingly sophisticated, they remain far from flawless. Policy targets are sometimes vague and lack operational clarity. Regulation and enforcement can be fragmented, and the carbon focus on market instruments can lead to an unintended negative consequences for biodiversity or rural equity. Furthermore, the volatility of carbon markets, the risk of fleeting incentives, and ongoing technical and legal uncertainties fuel skepticism, especially among the farmer community. A successful approach requires more than a single tool. Only the smart interplay of political ambition, robust regulation, and market incentives are, anchored by transparent monitoring and strong stakeholder participation, will secure soil carbon as a public good and market asset over the long term. In conclusion, soil carbon today is both an ecological necessity and an economic opportunity. Achieving a real balance between public goods and market value depends on clear targets, enforceable standards, and credible, fairly accessible market solutions, all designed for long-term sustainability. This integration will serve not only climate action, but also foster vibrant rural economies and resilient food systems that benefit us all. Thank you very much for your attention.
Yeah, thanks a lot for that presentation. And if I may, I would like to add to the last sentence, not only policy, regulation and markets, but also science and maybe also social questions. What happens if you're doing carbon sequestration in your farm and your neighbor tells you, hey, what bloody guy, what are you doing there? Yeah, so that's also an aspect we have to have in mind. So next speaker is somebody from the European Commission, if I'm right. Emmanuel Petel from DG Agri. I'm really happy that you're here. And you will tell us something about soil health and carbon farming in the overarching EU policy. So there's a lot going on, as I know, and I hope that you can help us getting an overview. Thank you.
Okay. I think it's okay with the microphone. Yes, I will come back on the common agriculture policy. I have already introduced some, I would say, discussion yesterday because there was a panel and I was there. But I will go more deep on this issue, and I will talk about CAP green architecture. In the fact, in a CAP, there are different instruments, but there is some dedicated instrument to focus more on environmental issue and climate issue. And here I will maybe put a focus on soil, but it was a focus, but you will see, in fact, CAP is a wide scheme, and I need to be some time to be more contextual in my approach. Just to remind where we are in a CAP, in fact, we have always a programming period, and in fact, we start by a new programming period in 23, and it will be end at 27. But each time, the CAP is under question. The CAP is a challenge, is challenging, and in fact we are prepared to propose. We have already proposed something, and we have already put on the table last mid-July a new proposal for the future. Due to the fact there is a multi-annual financial framework at EU level to fix the budget some stage for the future. And CAP is a big part of the budget and is a subject on this discussion on the MFF, multi-annual financial framework. But as you see before that, in 24, we consult as much possible the different stakeholders. We have a strategic dialogue. We produce a vision for the future. But now we are going in a new proposal. But before coming in this new proposal, I try to put some focus on what we have done during this programming period, what we could achieve until 27. Just to say, in fact, CAP, as you see, there is multiple objectives to be addressed on the ground. But inside of the current CAP, each time we focus for our concern here on some specific objective. And it's clear there is today 3 specific objectives. One more focusing on climate change, climate adaptation. Another one on preservation on natural resources, and including soil. Another one more preservation of landscape feature and biodiversity. And in order to address this objective, we have, in fact, some dedicated instrument. And for us, it's time is important to have a balance between mandatory requirement and voluntary action to be supported for the farmer. When we are talking mandatory requirement, it's just to say farmer, anyway, when he will get payment, is supposed, anyway, to comply with some existing policy, like there is a nitrate directive in EU. It's supposed to comply with that. And in case there is no compliance, there is a risk of penalty. But inside of this basic requirement, the first layer, we introduce some standard focusing on the soil. To say, farmer should respect some minimum action in a way to preserve the soil. We introduce tillage management, we introduce minimum soil cover, we introduce crop rotation. But when we introduce something, we need to define something. We define something at EU level, but we let member states to define this rule. And it's very sensitive rule because it's very basic rule, but this basic rule has to be applied across Europe and the risk of penalty. But anyway, it's the first layer, mandatory requirement. We can still discuss on it. And above that, we introduce more possible support, incentive action via the dedicated instrument. And I will not go too far in detail because there is the famous name of eco scheme and there is some other instrument, AECC, for example, agro-environmental climate commitment, some investment. That means we have a different possibility to drive and to, in fact, to steer a farmer to go in a good direction. I will go on. Look, just, yes, I need to, we have this instrument. At the same time, for us, it's important to be able to evaluate the performance, to assess the performance of the CAP. And it's a big challenge. And I will introduce how we can go in this direction. First of all, just to show, in fact, incidence on environmental and climate action based on uptake by the farmer and, in fact, the percentage of area concerned by this different action, depending on the member state. And you see the range of member state, and you have in a green green eco scheme, a dark green agro-environmental climate commitment, and you see, in fact, the percentage of the area concerned. The percentage, there is some variation between member states. It depends how you design the intervention. If we are talking about eco scheme, is an annual payment, and in fact, some member states manage to say we need to have a massive uptake by the farmer. Sometimes there is a big number of area concerned by eco scheme in some member states, but the strategy is to have a big uptake, and sometimes they lower a little bit the ambition of action, just to let access to the farmer. Sometimes the actions are more targeted, and as soon as it's more targeted on some area, the impact on the number of areas is more limited. And here we have some figures about how we can assess, in fact, the impact of the CAP. And we have fixed some result indicators. I mean, as soon as member state has designed some intervention, member state has to classify intervention depending on some result indicators. And we have some result indicators. Okay, it's very jargon, but there is some result indicator on the soil, and here there is a result indicator 19 on the soil is action supposed to protect and to improve the soil quality. And if you see here the diagram, if we consider what member states has notified, more 40% until 45% of the total agricultural area are concerned by some intervention to deal with the soil and to preserve the soil in EU. And here you see there is two colors, orange, what member state has planned, and after the green, what we have achieved during the first 2 years, what is the uptake for the farmer, and you see that green is very higher than orange. That means there was a good uptake by the farmer as regards the soil. But here is very global picture, and we don't know what we have behind this result indicator, because we suppose we will address the soil, but at EU level we try to classify intervention defined by member state by farming practices, and we have a labeling made of each intervention, and we try to fix different tiers to define the intervention. For example, for the soil cover, we have cover soil, winter cover, crops. We have more granularity, and it's the same for crop diversification and crop rotation. And based on that, we are able to, in fact, to see more in detail what's going on under the member state planning. When we talk about member state planning, we talk about CAP plan. There is in each member state there is a common agricultural plan, and inside of that you see here, for a limited number of member states, 13 member states, you have on the left the different breakdown on the practices implemented and the number of hectares. And you see on the top there is a crop diversification. After there is a maintenance of organic farming. There is as well we have put a focus on the use of legume, and there is some dedicated support to introduce in a crop rotation some legume, and here is a significant area, and after you have a crop rotation, but you see after we could see the use of residues to improve the soil. You see in fact how member state has designed their action. And it seems relevant when we are talking here about the soil health and soil carbon. And here, based on this practice, we try to see what will be the interaction with some key element on the soil. And we have designed a soil organic carbon content, soil nitrogen content, soil water retention, soil nitrogen leaching, you see, and even soil erosion. Sorry, but we see, in fact, how to make the link between practices and possible interaction on soil quality. Is our methodology, and at some stage is very, I say, rough, because we don't know every detail what is going in member state, but it's just to see our logic where we have to go. Now I will give you more insight on the future development. Even we have just put on the table a proposal, and we need to maybe to be able to present this proposal more in detail, because it's a common proposal and we need to be familiar with all detail. But just to say, in fact, CAP, we are at the Commission level, and with our level, we know where we are, in which context we are, and we underline, in fact, there is still a challenge to be addressed by the agriculture. We know the most common understanding, in fact, for Commission, but even for all stakeholders, is climate adaptation. And today, there is no doubt everybody is faced on some extreme event, and there is a need to act. And we have as well an issue on the soil, and thanks to our GRC, we publish some, in fact, indication on the soil degradation. And in CAP, in fact, work in a broader context, and I can show you the CAP. In fact, we have a different initiative around the CAP. In fact, as it was already mentioned, there is a EU soil monitoring law. There is, in fact, EU carbon removal certification framework. We have just published an European water resilience strategy, and we will publish a climate adaptation plan. That means CAP, in fact, is a key element how to address this different, in fact, initiative. We have, in fact, published now a new proposal, but it's in a broader context, is in a multi-annual framework, multi-annual financial framework, and there is a multi-annual framework architecture. And inside of this architecture, there is, in fact, different blocks. But CAP will be addressed on the national and regional partnership plan. The idea is just to work more in synergy with other priority in the CAP, like, in fact, cohesion, social cohesion issue. But inside of this national regional partnership, there will be a dedicated budget for the CAP and a specific CAP regulation. And if we look at the objective of the CAP, we will, in fact, we'll find a little bit the same objective as we have already mentioned, and there is a specific objective on promoting resilience, climate action, ecosystem services, efficient water management, biodiversity, and soil. But I will not develop, but just to say the focus is still there. And as regards the instrument, in fact, it's not a big revolution because we will keep, in fact, the first layer as a basic requirement, and we call that farm stewardship, and we have a nominate protective area. Our SMR is more existing existing directive, EU directive, and on the top of that, we have a possibility to have still agro-environmental and climate action, but we merge all existing envelope today, eco scheme or agro-environmental commitment inside of rural development. We merge both in one pot, agro-environmental and climate action for the future. And it's important after how to guide member states to go in this direction. There will be flexibility for member states, indeed, and we can challenge on the fact there will be flexibility, but inside of the regulation, there is an obligation to provide support in all following areas. And we have the list area on the left, the climate change adaptation, okay, climate change mitigation, but there is soil health is one issue to be addressed by member state. And in this political area, priority area, there is as well some focus on hotspots where there is nitrate pollution. We need to have some action towards extensification of livestock or diversification. As regards the agri-environmental and climate action, we will have still a management commitment, as it is today, based on some practices, but we introduce a new concept, transition towards resilience production system. And the idea is just to have a more, to start by the farmer who wants to move towards transition, maybe organic, but not only organic, and to allocate a lump sum, not to have a payment per hectare, but to have a lump sum at the beginning until up to 200,000 euro, because we want to include in this lump sum some action, but some investment as well. And we insist to focus, to have still action, to focus on support for organic farming and extensive livestock production system. Just not to forget on the fact we will continue to have a focus on the performance, and there is a common performance monitoring reporting framework. There is a dedicated regulation for that, and in this framework there is a list of indicators. And you have, we will maybe have a breakdown between intervention field, output indicators, and result indicator. And if you see intervention field, there is some support for climate action, and we have distinction between climate action, environmental and climate action practices, and environmental and climate transition. We have as well some dedicated field, intervention field for agroforestry is a key issue. And at some stage, okay, we will record hectares, number of the farmer, but at some stage we have a result indicator. And for result indicator, we could have a breakdown between a greenhouse gas emission, increase on protection of soil, organic matter is a key element under the result indicator. To show to you how we want to address the issue of the soil for the future. I have finished my presentation, maybe still very comprehensive, just to say we are in this dynamic to measure better what is going on the spot. It's important to say there is a survey at EU level based on some number of farmers. And in this survey, we want to develop a farm sustainability data network. That means we want to collect economic data, but we want to collect more environmental data at the farm level and to see the link between both. For the future, we are in a commitment to a project to develop a voluntary benchmarking system on the farm sustainability assessment. And it's a key work because it's not yet in the proposal, but it's just a coming work to say that we could, at the farm level, to try to measure the outcome, the benefit of some environmental action. I will stop there by this comprehensive presentation.
Yeah, thank you very much, Emmanuel. Thank you very much for that overview. And as I mentioned in the beginning, it's really complex, isn't it? It's a lot of work which is in front of us. And if I may have a wish, is make it simple, make it effective, and make it attractive, in particular to farmers. So give them a lot of money and don't ask them for more bureaucracy. So simple is policy. Okay, next speaker is now Mrs. Penelope Wensley, and she is the former National Soils Advocate of Australia, so the other side of our planet. She is patron of Soil Science Australia and in the Soil Cooperative Research Centre. Are you prepared? You wanted to tell us about soil policies in Australia. Floor is open to you.
Right, well, I don't have slides, so you'll just have to put up with that up the top there. But good morning, everyone. Great to be on day 2 of this terrific conference. I was asked to talk about Australia's national soil policy, but I'll add a couple of other things in as well. The first speaker said that I would be talking about our carbon credit scheme, which I'm not super knowledgeable about. It's not the area that I focus on, but those of you who are interested in this area will be well aware that the Australian Carbon Credit ACCU scheme, ACCU, is a very well developed scheme. I think we're pretty much recognised as being one of the countries at the forefront of doing these things. It is a highly regulated market. It sets a high bar for carbon, and fundamentally it's a scheme that allows landholders and others to use and earn ACCUs, as they're called, by undertaking projects that increase the amount of carbon. It is managed by something called the Clean Energy Regulator, and that is operates under our Department, not of Agriculture, but the Department of, it's got a long acronym, and if you try to pronounce it, it sounds like a sneeze, I think. GITU. It's the Department of Climate Change, Energy, Environment and Water. And what I think, if you're seriously interested in knowing more about the Australian system, which is, as I say, highly regulated, highly developed, then you should have a look at the website of the Clean Energy Regulator, which explains a lot about the methodologies, about the very strict systems for assessing, measuring, monitoring, the requirements to be part of the scheme. So it's a scheme that is considered to have high integrity. It has been recently reviewed by our former chief scientist, and I think it is one of the models that really is worth looking at if this is something that you want to know more about. So the Clean Energy Regulator and the Department of Climate Change, Energy, Environment and Water. And I'd be very happy in the break or during the rest of the time, I'm here the whole conference and field trip tomorrow, to talk to you some more about it. I know about it, but I am not an expert in it. But I'm pretty proud of it as an Australian, because I think we rank highly in this area. And, you know, we've heard comments about greenwashing and all of these issues, but there has been consistently a very strict approach to manage this well and to ensure and protect the integrity of the scheme. So if you want to know more, talk to me about it, and I can give you the website references. The issue that I was asked to talk about a little more was our national soil strategy. I was very involved with the development of this in my role as the National Soils Advocate, not as a government official, an independent advocate for soils. And this national soil strategy was really adopted in 2021, was really a breakthrough. I mean, we're an enormous country and we're a federal system. And so that means that our 6 states and territories were all pretty much doing their own thing. And we needed a national approach. We needed consistency for measurement, for monitoring, for engagement in a whole range of things. And there'd been a few attempts over many years to try to bring the states and territories to work more closely together. And we had a 2-year process of consultation, which included all stakeholders across all the governments and departments, across, in particular, conservation groups, landholders, farmers, and I think it was a very extensive and valuable consultation. And we had, through that, a national steering committee, and we had a working group that had the soil scientists and the scientists in there that I thought was very valuable to guide the steering committee that I and government representatives and so on were on. What was produced was, and this is very readable, you could have it as your bedside table reading, but it's the National Soil Strategy, and it is, it really, I think, is a very useful reference point. I mentioned it briefly yesterday. It contains, it starts with a vision, it then has guiding principles, lovely bureaucratic words, you know, collaboration, knowledge sharing, and so on, but they're actually important principles. Then the national strategy is a 20-year strategy. It sets out goals and objectives. There are 3. I mentioned goal 1 proudly yesterday because we were talking about soil health, and it's prioritised soil health. But the 3 main goals are: 1, prioritise soil health; 2, empower soil innovation and stewards; 3, strengthen soil knowledge and capability. And it is to be reviewed every 5 years. It's It's a plan that's going to be and has to be adapted as new information emerges and or as the climate gets tougher and we have to adapt more. And I think it's a very practical, pragmatic document. And again, happy to share more details. It is underpinned or followed up by something called the National Soil Action Plan. These plans are 5-year plans. So the first of these, reviewed, the first of these will be, this was 2023 to 2028, we had a lot of trouble on this, deciding what should be the strategies for the first 5 years, and it sets only 4 priority actions, and I think that was probably a pretty good idea to set the pathway for the first 5 years. Priority action 1, develop an agreed national framework to support, and you remember I talked about measurement yesterday, to support the measurement, monitoring, mapping, reporting and sharing of soil state and trend information to inform best practice management, decision making and future investment in soil. So we have committed a tremendous amount of effort in this early period into developing an Australian national soil information system. We really needed, and I think this is still lacking in a lot of areas, a consistent set of soil health indicators that will help to define common soil health language to help us understand the relative condition of different soil across different landscapes. So that was priority action 1. Priority action 2, and you've heard this word a lot in the last day about holistic approaches. It was that all the partners, and they all signed statements of acceptance of responsibilities and obligations, which I think is very important. Partners were to develop a holistic policy and strategy approach where soil function is recognised, valued and protected for the environment, economy, food, infrastructure, health, biodiversities and communities. Too much or too often soil is seen just through that perspective of agriculture, and we are really keen to get an understanding across not stakeholders but all sectors, not just the agricultural sector. And somebody came up to me afterwards yesterday and said, One Health approach. All of those things have to be drawn in. We are a long way, and I think we're pretty advanced in Australia on soil policy, but we're still a long way from getting buy-in and understanding and recognition of the fundamental connection between soil health, human health, and so on. So what was I up to? Which one? That was priority action 2. The third one is accelerate the adoption of land use and management practices that protect soil and improve soil state trends. And again, no time to go into the details. Priority 4, and I do want to talk a bit more about this one. Identify and develop the soil workforce and capabilities needed to meet current and future challenges for Australia and the region. I don't know about the rest of the countries that you come from, but it is an issue that we need to nurture the skill, develop the skills and nurture the workforce. When I first became involved in this area, there were so many people who said to me, we don't have enough soil scientists, our ag ministries are closing down, extension offices are disappearing. We really have to focus on making sure we've got the workforce that has the skills and the abilities to work in this rapidly changing area, in particular because we're moving more towards adaptation and resilience and climate smart strategies. So I think that that's a very important area, and we're doing a lot to do that, and I'll encourage that development of a fit-for-purpose workforce in the future, and happy to talk to more people about that. I'm just about out of time, but I've been watching this one, but I will mention just one other thing. We have, and I'm patron of Soil Science Australia, we have been placing a lot of emphasis on an accreditation scheme for certified soil practitioners in a whole range of areas, so managing arid soils and so on. But there is a new one which we have now established, and that is a soil practitioner certification scheme on carbon. And we're very proud that we have just issued, this is brand new, and we have just issued the first certification for someone who is now recognised and can have standing nationally and internationally as a qualified, certified soil carbon practitioner. There you are.
Yeah, thank you very much, Penelope. A really well-experienced woman. You already attended COP1, as I heard yesterday, here in Berlin. So the whole climate story is right in you. What you said, I think that's a very important point. You may need strategic plans, action plans, all these kind of things on national level, maybe not for the farmers as such. They know everything, usually. But I'm coming from the other side, for the policymakers. And if we're talking about money and necessities and policies, it's always important to have such kind of plans. Yeah, let's see if we have got the same thing now in the UK. We have Lizzie Sagoo here, coming from UK, and now to take my glasses. And you are from ADAS, that's right? And that's the ADAS Sustainable Agricultural Systems in the UK, and you will give us an overview about the soil policy in the UK. The floor is open to you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, good afternoon, everyone, or good morning if we're still morning. My name's Lizzie Sagoo. I'm a soil scientist at ADAS in the UK, and I'm also president-elect of the British Society of Soil Science. So I've been asked to talk to you today a bit about soil policy in the UK post-Brexit, which I feel compelled to say I didn't vote for, and I think is a spectacularly bad idea. But anyway, Brexit has triggered a substantial change to soil policy in the UK as we move away from direct area-based payments to payments for to farmers for actions to achieve environmental benefit. So following Brexit, we're in the agricultural transition period, which runs from 2021 to 2027. And during that period, we're phasing out direct payments, and then we're allocating that money to the alternative schemes. So last year, it was about a 50% reduction in direct payments, and this year, I think it's 76% reduction in direct payments compared to where we've come from. So in the UK, agricultural policy is devolved. So that means that England, Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland all set their own agricultural and environmental policies to suit the needs of their individual geographies, climates and farming systems. So this table here summarises the key policy drivers and incentivisation schemes relevant to soils across the four nations. Because of time, I'm just going to talk about the policies in England. So the 25-year Environment Plan was published in 2018. That sets the government's long-term approach and ambition for improving the environment. The Environment Act then set the legal framework for achieving that and set statutory targets for nature. And then we had the Agricultural Act that dealt with the environmental aspects of farming and set the legal framework for agriculture. And then linked to all that, we've got the Environmental Land Management Scheme, or we call it ELMS. So this is the incentivisation scheme. It's the voluntary scheme that pays farmers for taking actions to improve the environment. So it is voluntary, but if farmers want to make up for the payments they're not getting anymore under the basic payment schemes, they need to join ELMS. So the 25-year environmental plan that was published in 2018, that was updated in 2023 as the Environmental Improvement Plan, which where the government set out how they intend to work with farmers, landowners and communities to achieve the objectives of the environment plan. And they also published interim targets so they could monitor progress. So most relevant for us, goal 6 of the plan sets some ambitious targets for sustainable soil management. So the government said they wanted to achieve or bring 40% of the agricultural soil in England under sustainable soil management by 2028 and increase that to 60% by 2030. So that's quite an ambitious target, which the government aims to achieve through its ELMS scheme. And the phrase we quite often hear in the UK is this public money for public good. So we'll give our farmers money, but they need to do something in return to achieve those public goods. So ELMS was introduced in 2021 to replace the CAP. And it's this payment for farmers, get farmers to do things that will deliver environmental benefits. So ELMS is going to be delivered, or is planned to be delivered across 3 schemes. So the Sustainable Farming Incentive, Local Nature Recovery and Landscape Recovery. So Sustainable Farming Incentive, or SFI, that's a universal scheme open to all farmers who are willing and want to take actions to improve the environment. Local Nature Recovery has since been replaced by Countryside Stewardship. So Countryside Stewardship was one of our existing agri-environment schemes, and it's been expanded and adapted to meet the landscape objectives of local nature recovery under ELMS. And then we've also got landscape recovery, which is for more ambitious land use type changes, things like peatland restoration, river restoration. So a smaller number of projects, but far more substantial and ambitious. And the government wants to achieve wide uptake and participation in ELMS. So they set a target. They wanted, so I think pre-Brexit, we were about 30% of farmers in agri-environment schemes, and they said they wanted to get that up to 70% of farmers in ELMS. So I'll just say a bit more about the Sustainable Farming Incentive, because that covers most land and is most relevant to all farmers. So we started off with a 3-year pilot in 2021, and the full SFI opened in 2022. So farmers can have agreements. The agreements typically last for 3 years, and payments are made to farmers to adopt or maintain sort of sustainable farming practice that benefit the environment. So the SFI kind of lays out a large number of actions that farmers could take. So we've got actions for soil, actions for nutrient management, for wildlife, for biodiversity. And the farmers can select which ones are appropriate to them, and they can kind of pick and choose the actions that they want to do. Once in an SFI, farmers can add more land to it and more actions to the agreement each year. And farmers can also combine the SFI and the countryside stewardship at the same time, providing the actions are complementary and we don't pay someone for doing the same thing twice. Key thing to note here is actually the government actually closed the SFI to new applications in 2025. It was interesting. I listened to our farming minister on the Farming Today programme in the morning saying this was great news because the SFI had been so popular, they'd spent all their budget, and wasn't this great? And then you look in the farming press, and that wasn't what they were saying. It was represented as a significant portrayal of farmers. Our government didn't give farmers notice that they were closing it. It was closed overnight. So it has significantly damaged trust by the farming industry. It will reopen, so the government are now saying that they're going to have a new SFI offer expected in 2026. So it's just paused at the moment, and those people that were in an SFI have still got their agreements. It's just it was filled up very quickly. The government spent the budget, so they had to shut it. So here we've just got some examples of the SFI actions for soil and nutrient management in the SFI 2023. So these are kind of the ones I feel is most relevant to us here. So there are 3 actions for soils, which are aimed to improve soil health, soil structure, soil biology, which I've outlined here. So you've got SAM1, which is to assess, for farmers to assess soil, test soil organic matter, and produce a soil nutrient management plan. And for that, they get paid £6 a hectare plus £97 per agreement. We then have SAM2, which is a payment for multi-species winter cover crops, which is paid at £129 per hectare. SAM3, which is payment for herbal lays, which is paid at £382 per hectare. And then we've got our actions for nutrient management that I've also listed out there. So NUM1, assess nutrient management and produce a review report. And then we've got actions from legumes on improved grassland and legumes fallows. So it's just kind of an example of the actions that farmers can take. They can pick some of these, all of these, and a range of other options as well. Let's skip over that one. So this table here shows, this is some statistics from the government from earlier this year in terms of uptake of the scheme. So it has been very popular. We've got over 30,000 agreements in place with farmers. And in total, if you look at the statistics for farmers in countryside stewardship, environmental stewardship and SFI. So SFI and our sort of other agri-environment schemes, we've got over 50,000 farmers now in those schemes. And I think we've got about 100,000 holdings in England, so it's about half of farmers. The most popular SFI actions are the planning actions. And the one that's got the greatest area covered is SAM1, which is the one to assess soil, test soil organic matter and produce a soil management plan. So that covers 3.27 million hectares, 38% of the utilisable agricultural area. I'm going to skip over that one for time as well, but I wanted to highlight this report. So in England we have the EFRA Select Committee, so that's the Environment, Food and Rural Affairs Committee. They're a parliamentary committee that can look at that can hold the government to account in terms of the objectives that they set. And quite importantly, they held an inquiry on soil health back in 2023. They spent a year taking evidence from a wide range of stakeholders. And I've just pulled out a key bit there for you, which is quite significant. So the EFRA committee called for statutory soil health targets by 2028, standardising government-funded soil testing via the ELM scheme, agreed metrics and definitions of sustainably managed soils by 2024, so that was last year, and 90% farmer participation in ELMs by 2040. So you can see there's big ambitions there. There's quite a way to go to meet some of that, though. So, to summarise, I just wanted to pull out sort of what I perceive to be some of the opportunities and challenges in this sort of the new landscape. In terms of opportunities, this sort of idea of public money for public good, I think it's a sound one, and it gives us opportunity to achieve real environmental change. There is a growing consensus on elevating the status of soil as soil health as a key issue, which we saw with the EFRA committee, which is really important, and also really positively. I think if you look at the farming industry, particularly the farmers I know in the UK, there's a real will there from farmers to want to understand their soil and want to take actions to improve soil health. So that's all really positive and good. In terms of the challenges, we do have some challenges. There's lots of ambitions about sustainable soil management and how we measure change, but actually there's lack of a clear definition on what sustainable soil management is or agreed metrics to monitor change. And if we don't know if we can't define what it is, how do we know if we can achieve it? The other thing that I think we all accept is sustainable soil management is going to depend on soil type, landscape, climate and individual cropping systems. So some of these things are actually really difficult to legislate for and monitor. Pausing the SFI was definitely a significant negative event. It has significantly damaged farmer trust and confidence in the government. I think that it's going to take some substantial rebuilding. The other thing to note is the ELMS is a voluntary scheme, so with no guarantee that we're going to achieve the level of uptake that we want. And just one final point that I wanted to say, which I didn't put on the slide, is things have changed substantially since Brexit. We've got war in Europe and we've lived through a global pandemic, and we are now seeing more in industry in the UK that are saying the government is focused too much on environmental targets now, and that we need to think about food security and production. So it's complicated and it's not easy. So, thank you.
Yeah, Lizzie, thank you very much for giving us that overview about the situation in the UK. And I still remember one situation when your agriculture minister, right after the Brexit, had a talk to my agriculture minister, and I joined my agriculture minister at that time. And then he was telling her, it was a lady at the time, that UK is thinking about phasing out of the area-based payments. And say, what are you doing? Okay, but now the discussion is in place, and you showed perfectly that also here a plan is background of good and consolidated policy. Thank you very much. Next one is now coming from Uruguay, the National Policy for Soil Conservation, or Soil Policies in Uruguay. Augustin de Prado Pironi. That's you? No. Or you? Okay. Both. So, one presentation by two people? Yes. Yeah, okay. I have only got one here. So, you are from the Ministry of Livestock, Agriculture and Fisheries in Uruguay. That's yes. Right. Okay, thank you very much. Floor is open to you.
Thank you for all of you. I'm Daniel Silveira, and my workmate and colleague, Agustín de Prado, both agronomists. Uruguay National Policy for Soil Conservation. We work in Natural Resources Bureau of Ministry of Livestock, Agriculture and Fisheries from Uruguay. To put in context, where is Uruguay? Uruguay is in 30 to 35 degree south latitude and 53 to 58 degree west longitude. We have 1,100 millimeter average rainfall, 24 degree Celsius average temperature. Our relief is gently and undulating. The highest point is Cerro Catedral, with 514 meters above sea level, and the total land area is 1,760 square kilometers. The overview of land use in Uruguay, 16 million hectares. The most important items: 10.5 million of natural grassland and 1.5 million hectares in cereal and oilseed agriculture, and then 1.1 million of artificial forest. You can see the map. The main strategies of our work: sustainable intensification has been one of the main strategic policies of the Ministry of Livestock, Agriculture and Fisheries in recent years. One of the strategic axes is the development of policies for the sustainability of natural resources and adaptation of climate change. In this framework, the Soil Conservation Program, led by Natural Resource Department of the Ministry, in accordance with regulation for normative compliance of best management practice, to address rational use of soils and water, has been implementing soil management and use plans. This is the line time of laws and decrees, government decrees. The most important is highlight the law 15,239, promulgated in 1981. And says it is hereby declared to be of national interest to promote and regulate the use and conservation of soils and surface waters intended for agricultural purposes. It is the duty of the state to ensure the prevention and control of soil erosion and degradation, flooding and sedimentation, waterways, and in natural and artificial lakes and lagoons. Here the other line time. The soil management and use plans aim to prevent water erosion of soils, the most significant environmental problem associated with agricultural production. This causes damage not only on the soil itself, which erodes, but also to the landscape sites where the sediments are deposited and aquatic ecosystem to which the soil is exported. In 2010, we have a pilot stage on farm with cereal and oilseed agriculture system. And since 2013, start the mandatory for cereal and oilseed agriculture above 100 hectares. And then in 2015 mandatory for cereal and oilseed agriculture above 50 hectares. We have also mandatory cultivation of dairy system in the Santa Lucia River Basin. It's very important, this basin, because provides drinking water for the half of population of the country, more or less 1.7 million persons. The goal of soil plans policy is to reduce risk of soil erosion caused by hydric factors. The Soil Plan Act is a declaration of a projected rotation of crops and pasture for which soil loss by erosion is estimated. Erosion must be kept below a maximum value of tolerance according to soil in the agricultural plot. In addition, rotation components and other management practices must be adopted. The interaction pillars of our work: scientific evidence, productive sectors, responsibility of the agronomist, and the ministry. The soil plans must be designed by an accredited agronomist, engineer, or agronomist. The accreditation is obtained after passing a test provided by the Faculty of Agronomy and in accordance with Agronomy Engineers Association. The ministry is responsible for defining technical rules and inspecting their compliance. The existence of over 50 years of local research data focuses in USLE, or Universal Soil Loss Equation, is made possible this work. All of you, or most of all of you, know this. This is an inspection and monitoring. The professional is responsible for the technical quality of the presented plan and its future modification. MEGAP controls, ministry control the different aspects. First, soil plan submission is required and it is presented containing the required documentation. Second, the soil plans is technically correct. And third, the soil plan will be carried out by set on the area, crops, and plant management during the declared period. Here, the inspection and monitoring. In the yellow outline, the plan submitted. Here, plan omission or not submitted. In sky blue, fallow, and in orange, crop growing. Breach is an inconsistency between what was declared in the plan and the reality of the farm. And omission is growing crop with no declared plan in farm with an area above than 50 hectares. In case of incompliance, in most cases, we have a fine. Omission is more serious than breach. Here you can see the area affected with, in yellow, irrigation area, and in sky blue, the rain-fed area with soil management use plan.
Okay, I will take it from here. We have a new system for the management of soil management and use plans. We are updating the information system to enable us integrate the management of natural resources as a part of the National Agricultural System, alongside the National Livestock Information System, forest cartography, and agrochemical application monitoring. Information supporting the development of the policy, such as the National Soil Cartography in 1/40,000 scale, which allows the updating of some factors in useless equations. We are working on linking soil loss estimate from erosion with soil carbon balance models to incorporate into the soil management and use plans. After entering the formal information, owner, companies, and technician, the farm is drawn or exported from another system. The system will recommend factors based on geographic location, cartography, and digital terrain models. and the crops in the rotation under management are also declared, for example, tillage or no tillage. There is a picture there. The technician drawn his farms, and the system recommends some geographic factors. After select the crops or crop and pasture rotation, of course. A positive impact on soil use and management planning, reduce winter fallows, increasing rotation that include perennial pasture and increase cover crops, especially in winter, or double cropping in the annual agricultural cycle. Increased dissemination of the topic and best agricultural practices, recognition of the importance of planification and soil conservation with a strong commitment and involvement from technicians, producers, and landowners. Soil organic carbon work is underway on the possibility of adding the soil carbon balance of this fund for the declared rotations. This will provide producers with a trend of the carbon in their soils, increasing, decreasing, or remain the same. It is another health soil indicator besides erosion. This activity is carried out in conjunction with the Agricultural Research Institute with the support of the German-Uruguayan Dialogue for Agriculture. The objective is to find the soil carbon balance model that best fits the available information. We have 60 sites with soil management unit plans that were selected and sampled a few years ago, 8 years average, with the aim of characterizing the soils. This year, the same points are being sampled and analyzed again to see the evolution of carbon. Finally, with the data from carbon and the sites, models are tested to see which one fits best. For each sampling point, we have the rotation in crops and pastures, soil and landscape, precipitation, temperature, and estimated erosion. Main models to analyze is ROTC, AMG, Century, and Cycles. The ROTC training was conducted by 2 researchers from the Tuning Institute in Germany who traveled to Uruguay as part of DAWA cooperation. The remaining models are being worked on by INEA researchers. We are in the stage of selection model. It's a work in progress, still without conclusion to share. Summarizing, the plants use management soil is an excellent example of a public policy, maybe one of its kind, applied with the farmers for soil conservation, avoiding loss of soils, organic matter, and carbon. It's mandatory, of course, but they have to do it. Thank you very much for your attention.
Yeah, thank you very much to both of you for the presentation, how the situation looks like in Uruguay. And again, here, a plan is background for the policy there, and it seems to be well accepted if I look at the numbers you presented. So many farmers are convinced that it's the right way to go. Or let's see. Yeah, still on the way. Yeah, thank you very much, Uruguay. Now I hope that we can see somebody online. We're waiting for Simon Kremer. He is Executive Director of the European Alliance of Regenerative Agriculture, and let's see what our technicians can manage. Wonderful. You're looking nice.
Wolfgang, thank you. No,
I just mentioned that Simon Kremer is Executive Director of the European Alliance for Regenerative Agriculture, and you will tell us something about a new generation of agriculture and environment policies regenerating full productivity. So, floor is open to you. Please keep the time. and then everything is fine.
Thank you most kindly, Wolfgang. I tried to share my screen. I think I won't see you then anymore, but then thank you most kindly for having me and all the people from Soil4Climate for doing the amazing work of continuing to push this narrative. I'll ask firstly, with a historical approach, what are we doing policy for? And there was a great pharma revolution that underwrote the industrial revolution, the human revolution. And it asks quite poignantly, do we do the policy to preserve the earth or just a few proud men? And we see that historically soil organic carbon and global phytomass stocks, so total stock of living plants, grew exponentially when we started agriculture. When we grew the first innovations of cooperating better with plants and animals, domesticating them and ourselves, we accelerated global soil organic carbon buildup. And then, of course, when we started with the plow, with the grain monocultures, trade imperialisms, and so forth, we started degrading it. And we in EARA, we are a new pan-European farmer associations of pioneering farmers of all types, so big farms, small farms, northeast, young, new, old farmers, 8th generation farmers, from all the different agricultural practices, because we are non-dogmatic. So we really don't care what you do in terms of practices. We only care about the results of your agricultural management. And that means that your soil health, your ecosystem health, your yields, your productivity, your efficiency increase year over year. We have also a big movement of movements behind and with us that's then all about building, rebuilding, regrowing natural capital for humanity and the other species around. In Europe, trends are quite not so good. I mean, we had here some nice friends of Uruguay, also in Brazil. Also, if we compare, for example, France and Germany, there are quite differences. In Europe, we see here just as an example of mechanical soil disturbance. So we are just still far below good application of no-till. You see Germany far behind. Then in terms of cover crops, and that's not an assessment if that's good cover crops or bad cover crops, just cover crops, and it's still very red in Europe. And of course, we have land prices and land concentration, which are inhibiting regeneration in Europe. And then the share of the money that our people spend on food that reaches the farmer and thus can be put into the soil for regeneration. And correlating the number of farms, the number of people which still learn and practice the trade of working with the soils to produce food, fiber, and our ecosystem services. Now, of course, even in Europe, where we arguably have a competitive advantage in the geographical location with regard to climate change, but now we are being hit in our yields by climate change. This is just a summary of the most detrimental impacts of climate change on our yields. Now we believe and see all over the world and also in Europe a quite necessary fourth agricultural revolution. And I will share a little bit about that. We just finished this year the first phase of our research program, where we observed 78 farmers all over Europe. And we did a detailed total factor analysis of all the inputs and outputs from 2021 to 2023, modeling on APRI model, the German pond-driven agroeconomic model. And we did satellite analysis of the fields of the pioneering farmers, comparing them to random fields of the same agricultural land use category in the immediate pedoclimatic environment of the pioneering farmers. And then we had a lot of different pioneers from science, from the movements who were on the study, also a former agricultural minister. What we show now is that what we believed in the Green Deal discussions, there were still assumptions that weren't even doubted. So when we talked in the Green Deal about reducing pesticides by 50% and synthetic fertilizers by 20%, it was not even in question that we would necessarily have to reduce our yields too. That there's always a trade-off between reducing inputs, doing something for nature, and producing food. And that is also the great stain on the organic movement, which never really exceeded and was able to show at scale systematically productivity that was able to compete with conventional industrial agriculture. And now we show here empirically, systemically, we have made an innovational leap. So the 78 farmers, compared in Eurostat resolution full productivity analysis, are able to produce almost the same yields in kilocalories and proteins per hectare as average European farmers, with 61% less synthetic nitrogen use, 75% less pesticides used in total toxicity load, with 20% more cash income per hectare. And now comes the real incredible figure. On top, they were able to achieve these yields without any feed from outside Europe, even with 98% of the feed that they use from the same country. Compared, of course, in Europe, in our livestock sector, on average, over 30% of the feed inputs are from overseas. And how are the farmers able to produce it? They substitute the inputs and the feed that other farmers import through growing more photosynthesis, more soil cover, more plant diversity, more soil health on their own fields. And we see that, for example, here, Peter, an example from Switzerland. In one of the highest yielding sugar beet regions of the world, this farmer is producing now 95 tons of sugar beets per hectare, more than the conventional farmers around him. And he's doing that with 67% less synthetic nitrogen fertilizers, half the fuel, 88% less pesticides. And for example, we also always say, if we have too many cows, they are using too much land. And we show here that Christine Bayor, an amazing German farmer pioneer in holistic but also biointensive livestock breeding and fattening, is achieving almost the same yields as a standard German, not feedlot, but indoor fattening mix of maize, silage, rapeseed, a little bit of soy, wheat, and hay and grass silage. And she's doing that using no inputs anymore, a part of the fuel she uses to make hay. Whereas, of course, in the supply chain of a conventional raised beef, there is a lot of fossil inputs, pesticides, and also pharmacy products. Now comes a real interesting thing, because as I shown in the beginning, there's basically a correlation between soil health and the plant productivity, because in the end, we need to grow what we are feeding the soil microbiome. And here you see on the last 5 years, the comparison of the compounded pioneers versus their context-specific peers. And you see that they are massively improving. So they are producing in 2018 5% more plant, in 2024 8% more. But the real exciting stuff and the most hope-giving stuff inside here also for future generations is really the last year, because we all know who work in agriculture that how much I grow and how good my yields will be this year, yes, are dependent on how good a farmer I am, but even more so if it was a good year in terms of rain, if we had some shitty frosts and so forth, which are outside our capacities. And usually you see over the whole years, the curves, the trends of the curve developing in correlation. So when we had a bad year, the pioneers go down in their performance and the average farmers too. Now in 2023 to 2024, we see that the pioneering farmers are able to increase their plant productivity, although the peers go down, so it was a worse year than the year before. And that's, of course, amazing news for soil health, but also for productivity, for yield resilience and climate change, all of our humanity and nature. Now to the policy aspect, how can we enable not only the marginal pioneers who are growing these innovations, but all of our farmers to embark on the journey of regeneration? We say, and Wolfgang said it too, policy, less paperwork, more money. And we go here in the specifics of how we propose to do it, which is less bureaucratic workload, less risk in the transition phase, more planning security for the farmers, better deals, better knowledge, and better land access. And we have developed a whole plethora of policy discourses on how we can adapt our common agricultural policy here in Europe towards achieving that. And we just published also with the European Economic and Social Committee a very precise analysis on what KPIs could be performance-based indicators for remunerating farmers, for growing regeneration, without paperwork, with ever more money. And that looks like that. So we can couple basically our hectare-based payments to the satellite indicators combinedly of photosynthesis and soil cover, has very little costs, has a great impact on educating the farmers on what we need to do to be able to achieve these yields with significantly less inputs. And then, of course, we can have AECMs, direct payment for young and new farmers, which we could process by paying bonuses and discounts depending on the farm size, which are receiving the hectare-based but performance-coupled payments. And then what we really believe, especially for our farmers in the mature agricultural sector, so the highly capitalized, often deeply indebted farms, which run on very thin margins and thus have very heavy risks of experimenting, what we call operational transition risk insurance. So we create an ecosystem for the farmer in which they do not have paperwork to do, but they get challenged on their outcomes and they are insured for their risks in the transition. Because, for example, if I have seeded for 30 years by plowing or tilling, and now I want to go into no-till, to learn how specifically, how deep I put the seeding and learn the machines, it's quite difficult. We are all not good when we do something for the first time, but we need to create the ecosystem in which all our farmers are supported in trying the new innovations that we need them to learn. And then we have very specific KPIs, so absolute and relative performance on photosynthesis and soil cover, which goes also in the carbon market discussion of how do we remunerate pioneers who already have built a lot of carbon versus those who are starting now. Then we can go more into detail on how efficient is that produced, so relative year-on-year change in purchased inputs versus the yields, and ultimately with newest precision soil mapping and bulk density and satellite guided soil tests, we can track absolute and the relative soil organic carbon change optimally in confusion with phosphor and maybe some eDNA, which is now developing quite quickly. And I'm coming also to the end. So We are on a 2-year Regenerating Europe tour, where we are traveling to the main capitals of our continent, making events of bringing the best pioneering farmers of the country together with pioneering industry leaders, together with the pioneering public servants and scientists, to grow national task forces in prospect of the new CAP in 2 years. We have done great stuff in Copenhagen, also in Portugal with the leading farmer associations there. And I hope, Wolfgang, for example, we will see each other in November, on the 4th and 5th of November. We will be in Berlin. And thank you very much. And please join us in the global regeneration movement in regrowing our soils and our hearts. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Simon, for this impressive presentation about the situation in the area of regenerative agriculture. Sometimes it seems to me as if regenerative agriculture is something very different from that what we are doing. But if you look at all these elements he presented, there are many similarities to that what we heard already. So it's not so far, but it's sometimes really impressive. That may depend on the farm as such. How much pesticides, how many fertilizers you can reduce, but at least with the same output. Not outcome, but output. So that shows to us what is possible, but may not relate to every farm. But yeah, let's work on it for the future. And European Commission is here. They heard what is in there, and as I heard from you, there are also elements from regenerative agriculture in the proposals from the Commission already. So, the final presenter is now Ramona Stossberger from the German GIZ. And, yeah, well, you will talk about partners. Not you and me, no? But Partners for Change in Policy Brief. Thank you very much. Floor is open to you.
Thank you very much for the invitation and this opportunity. I hope you can hear me well. So I have the honor today to present the policy brief Healthy Soils and Resilient Systems, which contains 6 levers for sustainable agricultural and food systems. The brief has been developed by the global program Soil Protection and Rehabilitation for Food Security, short ProSoil, together with its partners. So first of all, I want to show you some impacts of the global program. After 10 years of implementation in 7 different countries, we have rehabilitated nearly 1 million hectares of land and sequestered about 1.7 million tons of CO2 equivalents. With our measures, we have reached more than 2.6 million direct beneficiaries, of which about 43% are women. Some more words here on the context. The global program's aim is to implement agroecological approaches for sustainable, climate-smart soil protection and rehabilitation at scale in the countries that you can see here on the map. The follow-up program Soil Matters is drawing from lessons learned of ProSoil and is aiming to scale more ProSoil's innovations. Both programs are funded by the Federal Ministry of Economic Cooperation and Development and co-funded by the European Union and the Gates Foundation. Now, like I mentioned, the program is running for 10 years and we wanted to celebrate our successes and lessons learned, so the Big Solutions Conference was organized. It was held in May this year in Berlin and brought together 250 stakeholders from over 30 countries. And this was the perfect occasion to develop the policy brief that I'm presenting today in a peer-reviewed process. The brief is accompanied by some further products which will be available on our website if you're interested. So before I finally get to the content of the brief, We have already heard that soils are the Earth's second largest carbon sink, and we know by now that degraded soils lose not only their storage capacity, but also their fertility and the critical function of water retention. So what we found in ProSoil is that organic soil improvement practices in Tunisia have led to the sequestration of nearly 2.4 tons of CO2 equivalents per hectare within 3 years. So our lever 1 in the policy brief is to prioritize soil health in policy frameworks. We should integrate soil protection into national policies. Our example here comes from Kenya, where the soil policy has now been adopted as part of the agricultural policy, and it's being translated into a 10-year plan for soil health and soil nutrients. That alone, however, is not enough. We also need to adapt frameworks for organic inputs and mobilize public support and encourage long-term commitment. As in Kenya, the counties are responsible for soil protection. They need the support to implement the plan, and that support could be support in making investments and integrating subsidy schemes for competitiveness. Our lever 2 is to innovate boldly, adapt locally, and prove what works. We should fail fast, learn, and adapt. In Benin, smallholder farmers suffer from unavailability of agricultural inputs, including fertilizers. That, together with soils depleted from organic matter and nutrients, it leads to poor harvests. So one low-cost innovation that delivers visible short-term benefits for the next harvest was the introduction of the pulse Mucuna pruriens into the staple crop maize. As mucuna is adapted to climatic conditions, it provides high quantities of organic matter and nitrogen to the staple crop maize. Also, the mucuna seed is easy to multiply, giving independence to the communities of external inputs and providing an additional income for farmers that multiply seeds. So this is one of the promising approaches that we should scale up. Lever 3 is to empower women and youth as catalysts for change. In Burkina Faso, agriculture accounts for 78% of jobs, and it's therefore a big pillar of the economy. Land use agreements on agricultural land use are usually made verbally and without documentation. And despite the legal equality of men and women, gender inequalities persist in daily life, and women often depend on male landowners for land allocation. So ProSoil in Burkina Faso is promoting an approach where husbands transfer farmland to their wives on a long-term basis, including contracts, and securing like that access for women to land. This has helped more than 2,000 women, has increased the interest in agroecological approaches, and has, with that, also shown benefits to the community. So here we should improve access to land, finance, and other assets. We should support collective action of farmer-producer organizations, and we should demonstrate, like I said, the wider community benefits of women and youth empowerment. Our lever 4 is to make extension systems inclusive and adaptive. Participatory advisory models and like farmer field schools and peer-to-peer learning is one important example here. In Madagascar, smallholder farmers appreciate agroecological measures because they do not only increase soil organic carbon, but they also show direct impacts on yields. These practices, however, are very knowledge intensive, and so the knowledge should not only be accessible, but should be transferred in a mutual learning process, including feedback from other farmers. State extension services in Madagascar are lacking behind in quantity and qualifications, and so a different alternative model had to be found, which in our case are the relay farmers. The relay farmers are dedicated, experienced farmers who are trained and who transfer their knowledge within the community. And they have now been legally recognized and included into the extension service in Madagascar for more sustainability. So, like I mentioned, we should formalize informal advisors through certification or financial support, and we should also leverage digital advisory tools. Our lever 5 is to invest in soil health. 3.5 million hectares of land in Ethiopia are massively suffering under acidity. This is partly due to the inappropriate application of mineral fertilizers. To balance the pH, large-scale liming is necessary, and here the private sector can come in with new business models, as experience has shown that means provided by the Ministry of Agriculture free of charge are not enough to reach farmers' needs. Studies have shown that these viable business models are possible, but again, that alone is not enough. We should also realign subsidies to incentivize soil health practices, combine finance with technical assistance and risk-sharing tools, and communicate economic value of soils. Farmers should, for example, be able to purchase lime on credit and pay back once the money from the next harvest is in their pockets. Last but not least, our lever 6 is to break silos and build synergies. We should foster multi-stakeholder platforms and cross-sectoral collaboration and promote donor coordination to increase impacts. My example here is our Solutions flagship initiative for soil health and food security. This initiative has been announced by UNCCD and BMZ at the Solutions conference and is supported by the EU and the Gates Foundation. It's currently under development and is still looking for more partners. And the launch should happen at COP17 in 2026. The basis of this initiative is the premise that strong advocacy for soil health and continuous knowledge transfer between donor collaboration, international organizations, communities, and national programs can help accelerate soil protection and rehabilitation on a global basis. I also brought the policy brief if you're interested to have a closer look. And with that, I want to thank you for your attention.
Yeah, thank you very much, Ramona, for giving us that overview, and that again reminded me that the farmer is in the center of our focus, and should be in the center of our focus. Bottom-up policies are always much better than top-down policies. And I think that was really impressive what you showed. So I would like to say thank you very much to all the presenters. And well, if you like, we have another 10 minutes for a short and rough discussion. And if you can see up front, there are some chairs, and they are for our presenters. So if you may come up front again, sit down if you like, and then we can ask the audience whether there are still questions. We had many presentations about many different policies. But looking at all these policies, there are also many similarities, not only different ones. Wait a minute until they sit down.
It's easier. Thank you very much. Thank you all very much for these interesting presentations. I have one question with respect to the Common Agricultural Policy in Europe. Because, of course, this is by far the biggest budget that we probably still have in the EU, that we've had for a long time. And it is the biggest pot of money, the biggest availability, or the biggest chance for us to steer agricultural activity in Europe. And there was a comment about trying to keep it simple. We see more and more proliferation of different laws, of different directives with respect to soil health, soil carbon. We have the soil monitoring law, we have the CRCF. And the big question is, when are they finally going to all be integrated into the Common Agricultural Policy? Maybe talk to the Australian example. I think the ACCU scheme is a great example for how to put outcome-based incentives into policy and make them work. And yeah, big question, when are we going to see these outcome-based incentives in the Common Agricultural Policy?
Yeah, thank you very much. Can you please tell us who you are and where you're coming from?
I'm Julian Kremers from Sikana. We are a company who provides MRV services for soil carbon projects in Australia as well, and for the voluntary carbon market and insetting programs.
Thank you. So I think that was a question related to the European Commission.
Yes. Yes, we are there for to see what is going on and what are the possibilities. But when I participate to such conference, I see different not view but different limitation. If I listen to the farmer wants to avoid bureaucracy, and it was underlined by the previous speakers. Yesterday we had some testimony from some farmer, and they have to manage the practice, and it's a big challenge for them. But to add a new task about data collection, to have a bookkeeping is still another challenge. Donc, we need to be aware about that. And anyway, in a CAP, there is in room to take initiative. When we are talking flexibility, we consider, in fact, there is some possibility at member state level, and each time we invite member state to discuss with different stakeholders and to see, they need to have a balanced situation to make access the support for many farmers, but could not exclude to have a more specific scheme, more pilot project, where we could allocate still money, but to go further step with more innovative action. That means everything is permitted, and maybe we could accompany that better at EU level. But we cannot go too much on top-down because the critics each time. But when I reflect on some indicators, still we need to have an intermediate level of indicator, because if we focus on measurement of carbon is a key element, but we see today there is different discuss how to measure that. There is a volatility, and for the farmer sometimes it's not so secure. Donc maybe we have to have some inspiration about other indicators maybe to attest the farmer are going in a good way, but not to have more robust not robust, but yes, not so to detail indicators, but to have more indicator who encompass different elements at the same time. But I don't know if I explain well, but just to say that. And at the same time, we in a CAP, there is money to be allocated to the farmer, but we try as well to insist on innovation, knowledge sharing. It will be still there. And it will be not maybe because there is a reinforcing of support for farmer now is a new budget, but there is still a possibility to have a budget for knowledge sharing, and it will be, I think, a key element in the future, and we should insist at that at the farmer at member state level.
Yeah, thank you very much. Sounds easy, but it's not only the European Commission discussing all these issues. At the end, also the Council and the European Parliament. So it's a long way to go. Then we had another question up there behind you, Claudia.
Hi, my name is Chris. My company is called Yardstick. We measure soil carbon. This question for Dr. Segu. So in the US for a long time, there have been programs called EQIP and CRP, which in our parlance are for conservation. And conservation in America is this like ostensibly bipartisan word that Democrats and Republicans both like. They've been super successful, millions of farmers participating, billions of dollars, very durable budgets. The problem is, about a decade into it, climate scientists started to do the math, and they were like, wait a second, like a lot of these management practices aren't good in the ways that we thought they were good. They may be good in this way, but in all these other ways, what if they net increase emissions? And that's a problem, because these are now durable programs with billions of dollars and farmers that are expecting to get them. You know, 350 pounds per hectare is like not insignificant money. So I understand why measuring outcomes and compensating on outcomes is prohibitive. I run a measurement company. Like, I really do get that. But nonetheless, I think I've learned from our experience in the US that programs that compensate for practices are doomed eventually because what gets measured gets managed. And most of us probably care about these management practices for the impact they have, right? Very few people are intrinsically enthusiastic about cover cropping for its own sake, right? It's in many ways a means to an end. So acknowledging there's no like simple alternative and admiring everything you described nonetheless, as you try and design a program that's durable, both politically durable, economically durable, how do you think of this tension between compensating for practices versus compensating for outcomes?
See?
Try this one. Yes, that's working. Yeah, no, you raised some very good points. A couple of things to pick up on there. One, you said about encouraging practices and don't possibly have the evidence base for all those practices. I think I agree with you on that. One of the slides that I skipped over was actually one where we'd done a review of sustainable soil management, which highlighted that lack of consensus on practices, you know, what were sustainable soil management practices, and then that the evidence base underpinning those varied substantially. So for some, we do have good evidence that they affect beneficial change. For others, there's less of an evidence base. The issue of payment for actions v. payment for results, it's really tricky because it's really hard to measure and monitor this, some things over time. And we're spending a lot of time at the moment debating and arguing about what's the best measure of soil health. You know, we're still getting people challenging us, what is that one thing that's going to define soil health? And I don't think there is that one thing. And in the absence of being confident that we can measure accurately, I think payment for actions that we know have beneficial outcomes is probably sensible, but while still trying to put in place those national monitoring programs, because it is really important to have national monitoring programs so we can look at those long-term trends over time as well. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, measurement on the one hand side, greenwashing on the other hand side. We have to avoid greenwashing, of course, but measurement is not easy, isn't it? Yeah, do you have more questions? Yes, please. Take my microphone.
Is it possible to ask question to the presentation was online?
I don't think that we can get him online again.
Okay, so I leave my... for someone else who can ask questions.
Okay, I'm sorry. I just asked that before, but it was only for the presentation and not for the discussion. Then we have got another question here. That's the final one.
Yeah. Hello. My name is Carl Müller-Sämann. I'm from CO2 Land. This is a non-profit organization. We have running a program on carbon farming with farmers mainly in southern Germany. I see some contradictory messages here in the presentations. If I go to EU policy, we have the Common Agricultural Policy, and we have the Carbon Removal Certification Framework. And if we go to the farmers, we say we have to comply with additionality. No? So what's business as usual cannot be paid. And if you are already paid by the European Common Agricultural Policy, this type of management or for example, cover cropping, then we cannot include it in our program. And there we have a problem. And the same thing is also we exclude maybe private. If we cannot go into a business with the farmer, we exclude the private sector financing. Because if it's already paid by the agricultural policy, we only can do the monitoring. Our program is then more or less useless because it is already financed by EU, and we can no count for it twice. So we need a system where we can combine the private sector investment and EU investment, because the common agricultural policy money will not be sufficient to really make the change. And I think in this point we still have to work a bit, and I'm ready to discuss with you. We have some ideas, and maybe you also already thought about this also.
Yeah, was that the question or a statement? At least the Commission says yes, or what do you say? The microphone is down there.
We are on the discussion with the carbon farming system. And we are associated in this discussion. And as regards additionality, we know the principle of additionality is under the basic regulation, and now our colleague in DG Climat will define further step with methodology and a delegate act, and it will be in the next session on that. But for us, from a DG Agri point of view, we want to continue to be able to give a support under the CEP to encourage farmers to take some good practices and to go in direction of carbon farming. But in carbon farming as well, there is other aspect, as we mentioned, MRV. That means the cost as well. I think there is a complementarity between CAP and eventually in case there is some potential credit, we can combine and to see a synergy between them. And we don't want to say the double funding, it's just to complement support in this context, because it's very challenging to go in a carbon farming for the farmer. There is additional cost, not only to implement the practices.
Yeah, thank you very much. And with these words, we can finalize our session. Please, big applause to all our presenters.